This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, previewing Week 11 action in the CFL as we break down the games for the upcoming week in the Canadian Football League. Let's start with the game taking place Wednesday, August 31st, BC and Toronto at BMO Field. And really, when you look at this game, it's two teams that are really going in opposite directions right now. BC has been one of the best teams in the CFL so far this season, a strong 6-3 record straight up, 7-2 against the spread for Toronto. They have been very, very inconsistent, up and down, 4-4 straight up, and against the spread for the Argos. BC coming off a nice road win against Ottawa last week, and you would think with back-to-back road games, maybe a tricky spot here for the Lions, but they did stay in the East following that win in Ottawa. They did not travel back to BC, so they shouldn't have any travel difficulties or time zone issues. With extensive travel, they've negated that with the way they've planned this little Eastern road trip the past couple of weeks, so that should help the Lions. Their offense, led by quarterback Jonathan Jennings, who's been very, very sharp so far, may be able to take advantage of the Argos in this game. They still are dealing with plenty of cluster injuries at linebacker and in the secondary. You think of Corey Greenwood at linebacker, Jermaine Gabriel, and Agwai Owusu Ansa in that secondary for the Argos, all injured and not likely to play in this game. So it's a defense that's very vulnerable right now, a defense that's really struggling and banged up, and we've seen it in the last couple of weeks. They gave up 34 to Winnipeg, 46 to Edmonton a couple of weeks ago. I do like the situation and the spot for Toronto. There's no denying that it's a good spot for them. They're off a bye. They're going to have their best quarterback, their number one quarterback, the veteran Ricky Ray, back on the field for this game. That should help the Argos offensively. I am a little bit concerned. BC's defensive front can get a strong pass rush, and Ricky Ray's been out now for a few weeks. He may be a little rusty. We've seen that a lot this season from quarterbacks returning in that first game from injury. They're not overly sharp. That would be the concern. It is a very good spot for Toronto. That being said, at the current price, I still think BC the better of these two teams. And one thing that can't be ignored is the difference, home-road dichotomy with these two teams. I mean, BC 4-1 straight up, 5-0 against the spread on the road this season. Toronto an abysmal 1-4 straight up and against the spread at home. BMO Field has not given this team anywhere close to the boost in terms of home field edge as people thought coming into the season, moving into the new stadium. So that's a big concern. BC's been great on the road, especially point spread wise. Toronto not so good here at home. I can only look toward BC. Problem is now the numbers crept up to 3.5. I think there was some value with BC below a field goal now, or up to -3. Now at 3.5, that's probably the price point where I'd lay off. I do think this could be a higher scoring game. We saw a low scoring game between these teams when they played in BC earlier this season. Toronto won a low scoring game there, and that's another thing, a revenge game here for BC, looking to avenge that loss in this game. But I do think Toronto's defense is very vulnerable. We've seen it their last couple games, as I mentioned, and their last two games have flown over the total. And this probably has the chance to be a game where we see some points scored in it as well. Thursday, we've got the Ottawa Redblacks taking on the Montreal Alouettes. Ottawa, a short road favorite, about 2.5, total of 49 in that game. I was against Montreal last week with Winnipeg. And below a field goal, it's probably hard to look anywhere but the Ottawa side for me in this game. Montreal's just got a ton of issues. I mean, they're just not a very good football team. They're not very cohesive on offense. We've seen that on display now for multiple weeks. You throw out a couple of outlier performances when they beat up Ottawa just 2 weeks ago, 43-19, but really feasted on turnovers to win that game by such a lopsided margin. And then that game against hapless Saskatchewan where they put up 41. You throw out those two games, and they've scored 18 points or less this season in every other game. I mean, this Montreal offense isn't working the way it needs to. Kevin Glenn not getting the protection he needs to. That's a concern for an older quarterback like him and a guy that isn't exactly mobile in the pocket. And to make matters worse now for Montreal, Duron Carter, by far their best receiver, by far their biggest weapon in the passing game, he's sidelined and out this week due to the suspension being upheld by the Canadian Football League for the incident that occurred early in the season. Coincidentally enough, that incident occurred against this same Ottawa team, where Duron Carter ended up pushing the Ottawa head coach Rick Campbell on the sideline after a touchdown was scored. He's been suspended for that incident. He will not play in this game. So that's a big weapon out of this Montreal passing attack. I know they still have the veteran Nick Lewis. I know there's B.J. Cunningham, Kenny Stafford. There's still some targets at receiver for Kevin Glenn. But losing Carter now, because he automatically, Duron Carter garnered double coverage. That means that's going to impact the way the defense plays this Montreal team, a team that was already struggling offensively. It could get even worse for them here. Now, Ottawa's defense hasn't been great. That's the one little ray of light that at the end of the tunnel here for Montreal offensively. Ottawa's given up 29-43 points in their last 2 games. Not very good. But I do think they're going to be a very desperate team. Ottawa 1-4 in their last 5 games, but Trevor Harris at quarterback for the second straight game after returning from injury last week against BC. I think he'll be sharper. I don't think he'll have as much with a game under his belt now. I think he's going to be a lot sharper in the passing game in this one. Ottawa's not playing great. That's the maybe one concern you have about favoring them on the road here, but I think there's even less to like about the Montreal Alouettes right now. And considering Ottawa just got shellacked by this team 2 weeks ago at home at TD Place, I think there's going to be a chip on their shoulder to wipe away the bitter taste of that loss. The only way I could bet this game right now would be to look toward Ottawa laying less than a field goal. Let's look ahead now to the Sunday, Monday games. We're going to be brief with these two because they're still well in advance. Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. Winnipeg laying 4.5 points, total of 51.5, 52 in that game. Annual rivalry game on Labor Day weekend between these two teams. And Winnipeg just keeps on, playing very good football. They're now 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games. You definitely have to like the way they have been playing in recent games. There's no question about that. The quarterback change to Matt Nichols really has done wonders for this Winnipeg Blue Bombers team, and it's definitely a situation where it has just brought new life to the team overall. The defense playing better, and I'm impressed again with how Winnipeg's offense has been able to play without 3 of their best receivers, Darvin Adams, Weston Dressler, and Ryan Smith all remaining out, but Matt Nichols has seen Clarence Denmark, Thomas Mayo, a bunch of no-names really stepping up and playing big time at receiver in light of all those injuries. So very positive developments for Winnipeg. They're on a roll, but I want to caution people that have been riding Winnipeg, and I have a couple of times during this 4-game winning streak, but you look at the line in all of those games. Winnipeg 9.5-point dog at Edmonton, 4.5-point dog to Hamilton, 4-point dog at Toronto, and a near pick'em, slight underdog on the road against Montreal last week. And I had a big best bet winner with Winnipeg last week against Montreal for my clients in the CFL. But the concern now is they're laying 4.5, 5 on the road. They're in a totally different point spread range now that they're not accustomed to. So is the value still there now with Winnipeg entering this game? I know Saskatchewan's horrible. They've still only won, I should say, a single game this season. Entering this contest, the Rough Riders, a dismal 1-8 straight up. 3-6 against the spread, but I did see some good positive signs from them last week in Edmonton. They fell behind big early, but they rallied in the second half, almost came back to win that game. They fell just short, 33-25. They only got outgained by 31 yards in that game. Darian Durant and the offense, which had gone, I think, a game and 3 quarters or something without a touchdown, they finally came to life late in that game. Some positive momentum, at least for Saskatchewan, even though it was another loss going into this game here. We'll get back to this game for play of the week time in the CFL at the end of this video. Toronto and Hamilton, Monday to wrap up Week 11 action in the Canadian Football League. We're going to be brief with this game because Toronto is that one team in the CFL this week that's playing 2 games. Again, Labor Day week and weekend, CFL wants every single team playing during this week. So because of that, and because it's a 9-team league, one team is ending up forced to have to play 2 games in a week. And this year, that team is Toronto. They're playing BC tonight on Wednesday, August 31st, and then they're playing in Hamilton on Labor Day Monday, September the 5th. So tough situation here for the Argos. 2 games in a 6-day span rather. So it's going to be a little bit tough for Toronto here, playing against BC and then playing in Hamilton. It's going to be hard for me to bet against Hamilton here. It really is. They're coming off a tough loss in Calgary. The last time they were off a road loss and returning home, they lost in BC. They returned home to Saskatchewan Zach Collaros' first home game at Tim Hortons Field since returning from injury, and the Ticats absolutely beat up on Saskatchewan 53-7. In fact, I recommended Hamilton first half -6 in that game, an easy winner. And I'd be reluctant to bet against Hamilton here. Off that loss to Calgary, returning home, Labor Day Classic, and they've dominated, and I mean dominated Toronto, especially on this field. They're 5-2 straight up, 7-0 against the spread in the last 7 head-to-head meetings between these teams. So very, very dominating results for the Hamilton Ticats in recent years over the Toronto Argonauts. And you look at what they did last year on Labor Day against Toronto, 42-12 blowout win for the Ticats. I think they're going to be in a foul mood after a loss in Calgary last week. It's not a bargain price by any stretch. We're seeing Hamilton at a few books around a 7.5 point home favorite here, but hard for me to look to anything but the Ticats in that one. All right, let's wrap this up. CFL play of the week time for week 11. We're going to go back to the Winnipeg Saskatchewan game. Winnipeg's been good to me, including a winner against Montreal last week, but I also had a winner with Saskatchewan last week as a big dog against Edmonton, and they came through for me. And I think Saskatchewan does have some legitimate positive momentum to take away from that valiant comeback effort against Edmonton, even though it fell short. And that's where we're going to look. We're going to take Saskatchewan here at +5 in this game against Winnipeg. You can get +5 at Bookmaker Chris right now on the Saskatchewan side. It's a rivalry game. It's tough to lay points in rivalry games, especially with a team on the road. Winnipeg's been great, don't get me wrong, but let's not forget in that 32-18 win in Montreal last week, that game was close early in the fourth quarter before Winnipeg eventually pulled away and won that thing. I think it's going to be tough now. They're playing a second straight road game. Saskatchewan's going to be desperate to get a win. They're back home where they have at least played a little bit more competitive in some games. They do get some confidence from the way they played in the second half against Edmonton last week, where they came back and made a game of it. I think that momentum could carry over here. We're going to look towards Saskatchewan +5 against Winnipeg. That game taking place on Sunday, September 4th. Saskatchewan is rotation number 218. Saskatchewan +5, your CFL Week 11 play of the week. All right, that'll do it for me. That's your look at CFL Week 11 from a betting perspective. I'm sports handicapper Ian Cameron.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SPR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.